We're learning the second Sikha on Parshas Va'aschanan in Chelek Chavtes on page 33. This Sikha also has a connection to the yard site of the Rebbe's father on Chav Menachemov, as the Rebbe brings in the footnote that his father was exiled because of his work of spreading Yiddishkeit to in Almaty, Kazakhstan, and there he passed away. As we'll see, it's connected to the subject of the Sikha. The shir today is being learned to Lenishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. From the pasuk beParsha Seinu v'nos el achas min ha'adam ha'el v'choy. From the pasuk in this week's parsha, where it speaks about one that killed someone b'shogeg accidentally, and he has to run to one of the cities of refuge, and there he remains and he lives. So that extra word v'choy, that he lives there, let it ben up. The Gemara says we learn from here as Talmud Shagala, a Torah scholar that is being exiled. Maglin Rabbi Imai. We exile his teacher with him. Shenemar v'choy, because the pasuk says he should live. Avid le midi d'tahavi lechayusa. Do for him something or everything that's necessary in order for him to be able to live. And that includes his teacher being in Galus with him, so he could learn Torah. The Rambam B'Sifrei Yad bringt it up them din. The Rambam quotes this halacha as well, and he says, Talmud Shagala Lari Niklot Maglin Rabbi Imai Shenemar v'choy. That the Torah student in Galus, his teacher is with him in order that he should live. On his Rabbi Meisif. Here the Rambam has the following line: and the life of those that possess wisdom of Torah, or those that are pursuing Torah, below Talmud Torah, without having the opportunity to study Torah, kemisa chashuvin. It's like no life, like they're dead. And therefore, v'choy includes sending his teacher to be there for him to learn Torah. Now, what's the Rambam's point in adding this line in explaining why his teacher has to be exiled with the student? So it can be explained as follows: as the mid bavaranter ashai lepshuta and dem. The Rambam is coming to clarify a simple question that there could be on this halacha. Yes, it's true that we must provide for this individual that killed accidentally in his exile everything that he needs. As the Gemara tells us, you should live in a place where there's water, where there's marketplaces, and so on. But the question still is, how does this make sense to say that we should go so far to provide for him what he needs on the account of another person's life, another Yid, ubefrat Rabbi, and especially his teacher? To shikin Rabbi and Galus, that we're going to exile his teacher also. Kedei, learn in Torah mitim Talmud, in order to learn Torah with the student. Doesn't it seem like we're taking this a bit too far? Ubefrat, and especially, as da retzach wegen Talmud, was es begangen im Chet von heurig nefesh. We're talking here about a student that has sinned, that he killed someone accidentally. Take bishgaga, only as an accident. Aber das gufa weiß, dass shaloike the boy. That is an indication that there's something not okay with him. But the far is a chayiv galus kehechi de lehavel kapara. This is the reason why he's being exiled, as an atonement for what he has done. If it would be a proper student perfectly, such a terrible thing, such a tragedy that he killed someone accidentally wouldn't have happened. The Gemara applies the pasuk where it says that from the wicked comes out terrible things, even regarding an individual that kills accidentally. So therefore the question here is, it's for this kind of student that we are going to exile his teacher into Galus with him. Is the Rambam defa Meisif v'chaye bali chochma umevaksheh b'loy Talmud Torah kemisa chashuvin. Therefore the Rambam adds that the life of a Torah scholar and those that pursue it without Torah is like death. That inyan from Talmud Torah chochma by a Talmud learning Torah, the wisdom of Torah by a Torah student is nit nar vigar wichtige tzrachim shaloi. It's not only like very important things that he needs, necessities as mizal zagen, but then you'll say vibalt. So we'll say that he was learning Torah up until this point, is das geworden sein Esek, and therefore this is now his occupation, his habit. So therefore he must be given the opportunity to continue in his occupation to learn Torah. So it's important, it's his current occupation, but it's much more. Now, noch mehr, furthermore, this is a shaylu von chayim und hepech chayim kemisa chashuvin. This is a question of life and the opposite of life, because without Torah, it's like death. Und wie bald Torah sagt dann v'choy, so since the Torah says that we have to provide him to live, it is nitokim breda. So there's no choice. And man muss schicken Rabbi in Golos to have lecha yusa. So we must send his teacher with him in exile so that he can have the basic life to live. That's what the Rambam is clarifying with this additional line here. On the makar of them and the source for what the Rambam says, as that the life of the students that are learning the Chachma of Torah without Torah is like death. That this is a clear pasuk where it says, wisdom gives life to the one that possesses this wisdom. That's the pshat and what the Rambam is saying here. However, it would seem that there's something very difficult here in understanding this halacha of the Rambam. According to this explanation of the Rambam, it would seem that what should be is, as the din, that this halacha, that a student that's being exiled, that his teacher goes into exile with him, is dafke Talmud, welche is nedarge, was ein ganze Chaim is Talmud Torah. It's only a student that's on this level, that his entire life is actually Torah. Bizas belay Talmud Torah kamisa chashuvin, that if he can't learn, it's like he's not alive at all. Aber the halacha is doch stam Talmud shegala. The halacha is being said plainly and simply for any student being exiled. The Gemara macht nicht kein chiluk und is nicht bedaktig wegen welcher Talmud is retzach. The Gemara does not make any distinctions regarding what level of a student we're talking about. If you look over here at one that killed accidentally, it would seem that the opposite is the case. Behemshich zum dem din von Talmud shegala. Maglan Rabbi Imai. After the Gemara says this halacha, that a student that goes into exile, his teacher is with him. Zok the Gemara goes on to say, Mikan shalayish adam l'talmid she'eino hagin. From here we learn that one should not teach a student that's not on a right level. Why? Because then shaloi yiviyu avinaisav l'de'arig b'shegeg, because the sins of the student will not then bring him to kill accidentally, and v'yikla, and that will force the teacher to be exiled. As it's explained later, that such a tragedy should happen is only by Rishayim. If that's the case, what is the Gemara telling us? As der Fall from Talmud Shagala, Retzach gar be'iker, wegen Talmud she'eino hagen. This case of the student being exiled is speaking primarily about a student that's not on a very good level, and therefore such a tragedy happens. Es wie net marain azat Talmud in dem Sog von Balei Chachma Mevaksha. How can we include this student in this category of those that possess wisdom and are pursuing it? Bis zu sagen as ein Chaim, belay Talmud Torah kemisa chashuvin. To the point that we will say that you can really say that this person without Torah, he has no life. When it says here that this is a student that's not on a good level, it means that in his behavior, he's not on a good level. As a fitzach shaloi kedeboy, aber b'negei sein limit kenef shezayin as in them as a kedeboy. But when it comes to his learning as a student, he can be on a very high level, and therefore for him, without the opportunity to learn Torah, he has no life. Zatman aber b'mochish, but we clearly see as b'shas is felten dan an hage from Talmud when there's lacking in the behavior, the proper behavior of a student. Felt the seichens and asmoder shkide b'limudai. It's also lacking in his diligence and his dedication to learning. On Avada Kemenet Zagen by Azat Talmud, a klal, definitely regarding a student on such a level where there's something lacking in his behavior, that you'll say a blanket rule, bizas defar maglan Rabbi, and to the point that we are going to exile his teacher, as sein Talmud Torah is geworden sein Leben Chaim, that his learning of Torah is his entire life. Demolt muss es haben a Wirkung auf seinen Hage. If that would be the case, it should be reflected in his actual behavior. So therefore the question remains, how can we say that for a student, Torah is life literally, even if we're talking about a Talmud she'eino hagen, a Talmud on this level? Regarding this reason that the Rambam adds and explains, schreibt the Rogatchover in Atshuva. So the Rogatchover writes in an answer to someone, V'zehu tam ruchni. The reason the Rambam gives here is a spiritual explanation. Und sagt dort an ander tam, bepashet, auf den Din von Maglan Rabbi Yimai. And he gives another reason, and he says this is a simpler reason to explain why the teacher is exiled with the student. The Fun Gufe was the Talmud is a Heilig Nefesh B'Shgage, from the fact that this is the student that killed someone accidentally, is a raya, as that is a Talmud Sheina Hagen. This is proof to the fact that he's not a good student. And we bald mit Tarnet lernen mit Talmud Sheina Hagen, since someone should not teach Torah to a student that's not on a good level. Kommt aus as hu Rabbi Pasha Bezeh u'lecheinu meshubed. So therefore it means that his teacher was negligent about this, and therefore he becomes subjugated to this. It's going to be his responsibility to follow and be exiled with this student. That's the reason the Rogatchover says. Aber, however, Neisef of them Tzarechien and them Tam from Rogatchover, in addition to the fact that the reason that the Rogatchover gives, it's difficult to accept this. Because according to his explanation, it comes out as their din from Talmud Shagala Maglan Rabbi Yimai, is that the fact that when a student is exiled, the teacher goes with him, is dafke and afal. It's only in a case when euch der Rav is nitken hogen. When there's something about the teacher that's not appropriate. The says as hat erkennt, as Talmide is nitken hogen. He was able to notice that his student is not a proper, on a good level. Und adafal became peshe gewen und gelernt mit dem Hepechadim. And he was negligent about this, and he learned with him, even though he should not have been. And that's not necessarily, it doesn't seem like that there's a limitation to this halacha, that only when the teacher is negligent in this, then he's exiled with the student. Und noch kama tzrichen ion b'pirushai she'en kama kaimei. There's other additional questions on the pshat of the Rogatchover which will not be elaborated upon here. Is oid ve'ikir additionally, and the main point here is the fun gufu of the Rambam bringt der tam besifra Mishnah Torah, from the fact that the Rambam does bring the explanation that he says in the Sefer Mishnah Torah, was a Sefer from halachas, that is a Sefer that the Rambam describes, that he only includes what's actual halachas, is muchrach to sagen, we must say, as lechitas a Rambam, that according to the Rambam, is at that tam. Afil as that is a tam ruchni, is it aber oisgehalten oich al derech halacha. Yes, it's a spiritual explanation, but nevertheless, it has good grounds even in an explanation in the area of halacha. Upshita as that is nit bestiret to der halacha psuke as jede Talmud Shagala is Maglan Rabbi Yimai. Definitely, it's not a contradiction to what the Rambam is explaining, that for every student, he has to be exiled. But if you look at the reason, not only does it not help us explain this halacha, it seems to be a contradiction to the halacha. Because only a student that's on such a level that Torah is completely his life, and without it, it's misa chashuvim, his teacher should be exiled with him. So how can we say that this is the explanation for the halacha regarding every Talmud of every student? We can explain this by first explaining better the exact reason that the Rambam says here. Those that possess the Chachma of Torah and pursue it without studying Torah, their life is no life. So seemingly, the Rambam adds here this word umavaksheha, those that are pursuing Torah. In Pasuk steht doch bloß ha-chachma techaye ba'aleh. The Pasuk says that Chachma, wisdom, gives life to the one that possesses wisdom. And the Rambam is ma'isif umavaksheha, and they pursue the wisdom of Torah. Why does the Rambam add this word? Befrat, as das is itself in Nitnar Beloshen, especially adding that one word is not just in the language one word, nor in Teichen. It changes the content of what the Rambam is saying. Bali Chochma is the pshat. When you say one that possesses wisdom, that means as a learning Torah and an eifin is Torasai dilehu. He's learning Torah on the level that the Torah becomes his. As the Gemara describes, Aved Bailim of the Divrei Torah Shalomad, he becomes like an owner possessing the Torah. He learns Nikras al Shemai, that the Torah is titled as his Torah. When the Gemara sagt, dass das ist Dafke, wenn man lernt an Eifin von Jäger, Le'yuna, when one learns Torah on a deep level. And when the Torah becomes completely one with the person learning to that degree, so then it's his Torah. However, when the Rambam says that he pursues learning Torah is meisif, this adds another point. As that is that he's not happy with the level of Torah that he's already learned, acquired, nor that is sucht ständig noch. He is pursuing and constantly searching to add and learn more. zu steigen hecher in Asagas HaTeire, to grow in his level of comprehending Teire. Warum zu Asagas HaTeire is kein Voluntar. In understanding Teire, there's no limitation. As the pasuk says, Arucha me'eretz mida or miniyam. It's longer than the measure of the earth and broader than the sea. Ubelashon Rambam, as the Rambam says, that Ovid me'ava, one that serves Hashem with love, Isaac b'Teire, he occupies his time with learning Teire, and he goes in the pathways of wisdom. Nafshei kshura ba'avas Hashem, his soul is connected to the love of Hashem. V'nimtza shoige ba tamid, and he will find himself being completely and constantly dedicated to his learning Teire. That's the mevaksha, a much higher level of pursuing the chachma of Teire. So kumtais, if that's the case, it comes out as like the Rambam. Then past to sagen as Talmud Teire chachma is geworden die ganze Chaim shel Adam. When can you say that Teire, the wisdom of Teire, becomes the life of the person completely? When it is nitna bali chachma, when he's not only one that possesses the wisdom of Teire, not oich umevaksha. Furthermore, that he's pursuing the level of Teire with this level of love where he can't get enough of the Teire that he learns. Isn't it move on kanal? If so, it's not understood as pointed out before. What's the makar Rambam of the Reisafe valchesteiten in pasuk? What's the source of what the Rambam says here to add this detail, which is not explicitly in the pasuk? Nachme, furthermore, apizev noch starke die shaila na siv beis. By adding this word, this only strengthens the question asked earlier in siv beis. As the Tam Rambam is l'chayre nit masen mit the halacha b'payil. The reason the Rambam gives is not fit with the actual halacha. Because according to this, it comes out. In order to obligate a teacher to be exiled with a student, the student has to be in a level that not only that the Torah becomes his, which is already a great level to attain, he also has to have that level of connection in Torah to someone that is constantly pursuing the Torah more and more. B'shas as in Gemara steht, as the fall from Talmud Shagala is be'ikir, bad Talmud Sheine Hagen. While the Gemara says that primarily this halacha of the student being exiled refers to a student that's not on a good level. So how do we square this with what the Rambam is describing, the student that learns Torah on this level? So therefore, it seems right to say that what the Rambam is saying here is as follows: as kavanas Rambam mitar esafo mvaksheha. When the Rambam adds this word, that he pursues learning Torah, is nitzu meisav sein at zweiten Tnai. In Dargas HaTalmud, the Rambam is not adding an additional condition for the level of the student, that only when he's on this great level is Torah his life completely, nor der Vav von umevakshah is b'makim tevis. The Vav of this word is in the place of the word "ay," which means or, ki'ilu avot geschriben, as if the Rambam would have written "Bale chachma ay mevaksheha," ones that possess wisdom of Torah or are pursuing its wisdom, they do not have any life without Torah, which is common in the language of the Gemara and the Rambam, as it's pointed out in the footnote. That says what this means is, as the Rambam read wegen zwei sugim. The Rambam here is speaking about two categories. Aleph, die welche zene shain in the darge from Bale chachma. One, the Rambam is speaking about those that are already on the level of possessing wisdom of Torah. Beis val kolpanim mivaksheha, or at least on the level that they're pursuing the wisdom of Torah. Ze zene noch nit geworden bali chachma. They're not yet on the level of possessing the chachma of Torah. Aber ze suchen zu werden bali chachma. They're looking, they're searching and pursuing to become ones that possess the wisdom of Torah. Und wie bald das Torah is mavtiach yegaita umetzas tamen, since Torah promises that when one will toil, he will find. And when one that says this, believe that this is true, is barer asafsaf et erver and abal chachma. Therefore, it's clear that eventually he will become one that possesses the wisdom of Torah. Kumtais as bekayach is a shenitz tabal chachma. So therefore, potentially, this person even now can be defined as one that possesses the wisdom of Torah. Vas chayav b'lei talmud Torah k'misach hashuv, and therefore his life without studying Torah is no life at all. And based on this, we have our question answered. Was the din werd gesagt b'shaychus zu jeden Talmud oicha Talmud sheine hagen? How this halach is being said regarding every student, including the student that's not on a high level. Warum der Fungufe was the Rav was said is doch bestam Rav hagen? Because from the very fact that this teacher, which we're talking about a teacher that we could assume is a proper teacher. Hat reingenommen als Talmidai, he took him in as a student, is a Raya as the Rav hat zen, al kopanim gefielt in dem Talmud, as is in Geder from Bavakshah. So it's as proof of the fact that the teacher saw, or he sensed to some extent, that this is a student that is seeking and searching. He wants to learn Torah. As sucht al kopanim zu werden a Bal Chachmeh, that he's looking for the opportunity to become a Talmud Chacham, to possess the wisdom of Torah. Well, Andish wollte mit angenommen als Talmud, because if that was not the case, he wouldn't have taken him in as a student. On the far is there din as Maglan Rabbi Imoy, and therefore for this student, the teacher is exiled with him. Kedei zu areis brengen beim Talmud amiyim and akayach al apayel, in order to bring out that potential that he should become a Torah student fully. As a Zolveren a Bal Chachmeh bepayel, he should be that one that possesses Chachmeh in actuality. Durch machen von dem Talmud she'ena Hagen, a Talmud Hagen, he becomes a proper student, biz as a Zolveren a Bal Chachmeh, to the point that he becomes one that possesses wisdom. And therefore, this halacha applies even to such a student. Yesh loisef bezeh, to add another point to this, the din von Aved le'midi, the tehavi le'chayuse, this halacha, that you have to provide for him what is necessary that he can live, is nit na beneged dem ersten rega, when the heilig nefesh b'shkaga kommt in galus. Doesn't only refer to the very first moment when this person that killed accidentally is arriving into exile. Nor der v'chaya muzayin, muss bewahrend werden auf dem ganzen Zman, was gefindt sich dorten, ad meisa keiner gadol. This has to be taken care of and provided for the entire duration of the time when he's found there in the galus until the Kohen Gadol passes away and he leaves. If so, it comes out. As the chiyuv from Maglan Rabbi Imai, the obligation to exile the teacher with him is nit da mitzadem itztig matzah from Talmud. It's not only based on the current level of the student, but Chachmeh is en chayim blaze b'koyach, where now the wisdom of Torah is his life, but only in potential. But it's also based on the condition of the student that will follow when he will be, and as we know that he will be, a one that possesses Chachmeh in actuality. Because since even now he's pursuing Torah, is doch barer asafsa betaveren aba Chachmeh bepoil canal. So it's clear that he will become this Talmud Chacham possessing the wisdom of Torah, as explained. The Yes Shleimar, as hat sich shein angeheben, is sich seinen dem bepoil. If he's pursuing, that means that he already begins now to do what is necessary to become that Talmud Chacham. On the Rebbe is shein itzter the chiyuv zu bewarnen dem v'chay from Talmud, and therefore even now there's the obligation to make sure that he has the life of Torah of this that he needs for this student. That's the explanation of the Rambam that clarifies the entire idea here with one word, with adding this word mivaksheha. He's pursuing the Chachmeh of Torah. Eine von die gar einfache Eirois von dem Inyan Anal is one of the very simple and basic lessons that we can take from this subject is the Geidle Inyan von Asel Charav. How far goes this that the Mishnah tells us that one should appoint for himself a teacher, a mentor. When one makes a proper calculation regarding his condition, and one comes to the realization that he's on a level of a student that's not the greatest level. One may fall into a despair, God forbid. How could he see himself out of this situation and transform himself to be a student on a good level? And even more, to become a student on the level where he becomes the individual that possesses Chachmah, where the Torah becomes his. If them is the Eitzah, so for this, the Eitzah, the advice Torah gives us is a Seil Charav. Appoint a teacher, a mentor for yourself. When one finds a proper and right mentor, is barer as the Rav vet mit knellen auf zu machen im a Talmud Hagen. Then it's clear that this teacher will do whatever necessary, knellen, which means he intensively will drill down on the subject to teach and to explain the student that he will become a proper student. Whatever the condition of this student is presently, if he's just looking and pursuing to become that Baal Chachmeh, as sucht zu werden a Talmud Hagen, he wants to become a student on a good level, as a fil oib der Weile, is noch in a matzav yored kazeh, was fordert mitzad dem Rav, So even if at this point he's on a level that it demands of the teacher to go down on his level and to be with him in his exile, Paskin Teire, as Talmud Shagala, Maglan Rabbi Imai, the Teire rules and says that the teacher has to go into exile with the student, and therefore Naisif, as the Rav vet mit him lernen, in addition to the fact that the teacher will learn with him Teire, vet is hereingelegen oif zum imachen him ab Talmud Hagen. He will also invest himself into the life of the student to transform him and to make him into a proper student on a high level. Bis zu der Dage from Bal Chachme bis zu werden Kemoisoi the Harav Mamish, to the point that the student will be on a level of one that possesses Chachme and to even come to the level to be like the teacher himself. Der Inyan von Talmud Shagala Maglan Rabbi Imai is euch voran in der Aveda Ruchnis shel kol echad v'echad. This point about the teacher going into exile with the student also applies to the spiritual Aveda of every single Yid. Jeder Yid is mit dem Eibishten bedugme kavayachol v'yatal mit dem Rabbi. Every single Yid is in a relationship with Hashem like a teacher and a student. Wie der Pasuk sagt, v'chol banayich, jeder Yid limudei talmidei avaya. Every single Yid is a student of Hashem. Jeder Yid is a Talmud von Eibishten. Mishas a Yid tut chas v'shalom achet neged Hashem. Is it doch lefisha biz v'shav v'rafaloi a Talmud she'ena hagen. So if a Jew sins, God forbid, so at that time, temporarily, until he does tshuva, he is a student that's not on a proper level. On the sibbe vev sharius of achet is the cause and the possibility for a Jew to sin, but that is nit kim bal chochma. It's because he's not on a level where he possesses wisdom. What level of wisdom are we talking about? Abir, the explanation for this is the Alter Rebbe is mevayed in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya the pasuk kanal hachachme techaya balel. The pasuk quoted before that chachme gives life to the one that possesses the wisdom. As the chayes von a Yidden kommt von Eibishten ein seif baruch hu, the life of a Yid comes from Hashem, from the level of ein seif, the infinite revelation of Hashem. On his meyachis sein chayes zu chachme. Chachme techaya. And the Alter Rebbe explains that the source of this level of Hashem's life comes from the level of chachme. Weil ein seif baruch hu melubish b'tchines chachme shebenefesh ha'adam yiyeh mishiyeh mi Yisrael. Because the infinite level of Hashem's revelation is invested in the level of the wisdom, in the soul of every single Jew, regardless of who he is. On the highest of Eibishten is mispashit b'chol b'chines hanefesh kolo la'achyesa durech b'chines ha'chachma. And this level of godly revelation then extends and spreads in the rest of the entire life of the person through the level of chachma. On the far b'shas mizn geder from bale chachma. Therefore, if a person is in that category that he possesses this wisdom, he's defined as one that has it, and we see him as one that is a Baal Chachma. Filtbend and Verbund was man hat mit Eibishten. He senses and experiences constantly this connection he has to Hashem. Mit ein Seif Baruch Hu, was is melubish, b'b'chines ha'chachma shebenefesh, with the infinite revelation of Hashem, which is in the level of the wisdom of the soul. Obemele is min shayach to keine inyan von chet. If that's what the person is living with and experiencing constantly, there's no possibility at all for any sin. The Efsharius of Chet nimmt sich davon, the possibility of a sin comes from the fact, was man is nit kein Bal Chochmeh, when one does not possess the level of Chochmeh on this level. Man fühlt nicht im Verbund mit Rabbi Kodesh Baruch Hu, and he does not live with this level of connection to Hashem, his teacher. B'shas mischoite neged Hashem, when one sins against Hashem, then what happens is, hat mitzatan mit dem Goyel Adam. Then you have to be afraid of the Goyel Adam, which in the case of when one kills accidentally, this is a relative that wants to revenge the blood that was spilled and is looking to kill this murderer. And the Gemara tells us, this refers to the Yetzahara, Kamaim Chazal, Hu Satan, Hu Yetzahara, Hu Malach HaMavis. The Satan is the evil inclination, and he's the angel of death. Was will bringen a Yidden zu a Matze von Miseruchnis Achmar al-Etzan. He's constantly trying to bring a person to a spiritual death. So for this, for a person to be armed properly, to deal with this, the Torah tells us clearly, when a student is exiled, his teacher has to be exiled with him. Spiritually, what this means is, even if this is a Yid, that in actuality, on a revealed level, as far as his experience is concerned, he's not one that possesses that wisdom, that infinite level of connection to Hashem. Ist chas v'shalom zu sagen, as der Fahr ist bei ihm das Battle geworden, der Verbund mit dem Eibischen. God forbid to say that because of this, his connection to Hashem is over. Because every single Jew, regardless of who he is al kolpanim and get that from Mavaksheha, can at least be defined and put into the category of one that is searching and has a desire to create that connection. The Rabbi is the well-known saying that the Rabbi said, and brought Ayid nita will und nita ken sein abgerissen von Göttlichkeit. That a Jew and every Jew, not he can, and not he wants, and not he can be torn or disconnected from godliness. V'meile is bei ihm ständig voran die Iskashis mit dem Eibischen. And therefore, he constantly has that connection to Hashem. Es ist nur, was der Verbund ist bei ihm behalten. It's just that this connection is concealed. In the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, he bebchines shina b'rishayim. It's like in a state of sleep by those that are rishayim. Aber reich damalt is es megin from Goyal Adam. But even in this case, when it's asleep, it will protect him of the Goyal Adam, of the Yetzer Hara that seeks to kill this Yid. Und lastnit kemisse ruchnes Rahman al-Islam, and will not allow a spiritual death. God should save us from this. Und b'shas the Yid weiß der Rei sein Tshuka zu werden a Talmud Hagen. When a Yid expresses at least his desire to be a student on a proper level, mivakshel begoli, you can see openly and clearly that he's pursuing this. That is gleich poil sein polasai, auf zu machen von ihm a Talmud Hagen und a Bal Chachma. This will have its effect, and it'll turn him into a proper student to become that Bal Chachma was demelt ha-Chachma techaya. Then his entire life is this level of Chachma, the life of Ein Sof. Das bringt in him a rein achayis from Kedusha, b'chol koiches nafshay. This brings in him a new life of holiness in all of his faculties. Was das is mevatel b'derech memele, the shlita von Yetzer Hara. And this automatically gets rid of any power that the Yetzer Hara seeks to have over the person. That's the power of Baal Chochmah, and the reason why it's necessary to have the student with his teacher to bring this out from him. Just as this applies to every individual Yid, al derech zeh ub'mikol shekain v'chulu v'chulu is this benegei Klal Yisrael. How much more so, and many folds more times, this applies to Yidden in general. B'shas Yidden gefunden sich in Golus, in the time period we are in exile. And especially this last exile. And even more specifically, in this doubled and redoubled darkness in the last moments before Mashiach arrives. One may fall into a despair and say, from where comes our help? Zok Teiris, the Torah tells us, a halacha berura, a clear halacha that Talmud Shagala, Maglan Rabbi Imai, a student that has been exiled, his teacher is exiled with him. Und wie bald, as Magid Dvarav LeYaakov, Chukav u'Mishpatav LeYisrael, Hashem says his mitzvahs to Yidden, and what this means is, Mashuhu Aiseh, Huayim LeYisrael Asa, it's what he fulfills himself. He commands Yidden to do, and that's why it says Dvarav, Chukav u'Mishpatav, with the Vav, Yudvav at the end. It's b'meila moving, so it's understood as the Rabbi Hashem, which is the teacher, gefindt sich kavayachol and Golus zusammen mit Yidden Talmidei, is found in Golus, so to speak, along with the Yidden, his student. And as the Medrash tells us, wherever Yidden are exiled, the Shechina is along with them in the Golus. Hashem is found with Yidden, amongst them, in Golus. And Hashem says, my children should do tshuva and we will return. And Payot, the teacher that's with the Eibishter, which is with the Yidden, has that effect as mezolveren talmidim uhuganim, that the Yidden should become on a bright and proper level as durch them gate nareis von Galus, and through this we leave exile. Nachmer, furthermore, Chazal zanem medayek, the words that it says in the Gemara about this halacha is maglin Rabbi Imai. We exile the teacher with the student. Nit meviin Rabbi Imai v'chayetz b'zeh. The language used here is not that we bring the teacher to be with the student or any similar language. Was das meint, so therefore what that means is, as oich beim Rav, is this a matzav shel Golus. That for the teacher himself, he's present with his student in the exile to the point that for the teacher himself, it's also an exile. It not as the Rav, as der Rav darf sich gefinnen in demselben Stadt mit seinem Talmud. This means that it's not enough for the teacher to be there in the same city with his student, aber dort gufe is via ben chayrin. But the teacher himself feels that he is on a different level. He did not kill someone accidentally. He's not obligated for himself to be here. So therefore he's really a free man. Because b'matzav kazeh, if that's the case, that it kennen mashpia sein b'shleimus auf dem Talmud, he will not be able to have the proper and full effect on the student in an eifem von avod le'midi to have chiyusa, to do what is necessary to give him life. Varum zwischen sei is a merchak otzum v'efsek, because between the teacher and the student there's a major gap. The Talmud is in Galus, the student is in an exile, und der Rav in Cherus, and the teacher is a free man. Ob b'meile is wie is es möglich, als der Rav soll sich kennen reinlegen b'shleimus in dem Talmud's matziv zu machen von ihm a Bal Chochma. How is it possible for the teacher to then come down to the level of the student and relate to him and lift him up to turn him into a Bal Chochma? Es muss sein maglin Rabbi Yimai. And what the Gemara is telling us is it must be that the teacher comes down to that level and experiences exile with the student. Der Rav darf sich gefinnen in demselben Matziv, Galus, wie der Talmud gefinnt sich. The teacher should be found in the very same condition of an exile like the student. The same applies, so to speak, between Hashem and Yidden. When Yidden is in Galus, is Neisef, as Shchine is Shchinte Begalusa, in addition to the fact that Shchine Imam, that the Shchine is in Galus with Yidden, so, or Shchine Imam, in addition to the fact that the Shchine is with Yidden, is Shchinte Begalusa. The expression that it says in the Zayir is that the Shechina is exiled. The Shechina is in Galus, in an exile. And whatever pain and suffering Yidden experience, Kaviyachal Hashem experiences that suffering Zayin Tzara Kaviyachal. Hashchina Shruya im Yisrael, but Tzaras Galusam. The Shechina experiences that Tzara, and the very same Tzara of the Yid, on that level. Kaviyachal is by the Shechina as well. Obemele is nitok in art for Yish Chas V'Shalom. So therefore, there's no room at all for any despair, God forbid. V'adarab, on the contrary, says, butter. It's 100% clear, as nid kukendik, oifum matziv, oyim v'noyre from Galus. Not paying attention to the very terrible situation of exile is Avaya Shem Recha, Avaya Tzilcha Varom, Ergefinzich al Yad Mirecha. Hashem will protect you. And He is there, right near you, on your right side, all the time. V'oid neve'ikr. Additionally, another important point and a main point. Since the Shechina is in Galus with a Yid, is a filo oid mitzad the matzah von a Yidin. V'ld gewena kesal gedaitach, as the Galus dav chas v'shalom noch a bissel dairin. If, God forbid, there's a thought that one would think that the Galus should last a little longer, is lamani esa. As the pasuk says, that Hashem says, I will do it for my sake. The Eibishter bringt the Galus to lieb sich kaviyachol. Hashem will redeem Yidin for His sake because He's in Galus with Yidin. That this happens quickly. The Rebbe does not hold Yidden back in Galus, even a blink of an eye. Nemt the Rebbe areis sich unbana from Galus. Hashem redeems Himself and His children from exile on Firtzei, und sie gehen zusammen in the Gula Mitzvah Vashleima Miyad Mamish. And He leads them out of Galus together to the ultimate and final redemption, may it be immediately, literally.